up. I put my fists up. I go, what do you want? One of them has a swastika on his neck. It took up his entire neck. It came up onto his face. The other one had "fuck you" tattooed on his eyelids. So I go, what do you want? And the swastika guy says, you the new guy? I said, yeah, so? And he says, you a fag? I said, no, I'm not a fag. He said, you a rat? I said, no, I didn't have anybody else in my case. I'm not a rat. And he says, you a chomo? I go, I don't know what that word means. He goes, chomo, child molester. I said, no, I'm not a child molester. And he goes, okay, you could sit with the Aryans in the cafeteria. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm with the Aryans now.
Oh,
grand. Yeah. And then the guy across the hall from me was the boss of the Bonanno family. And one day he said to me, I would get the New York Times and he would get the New York Post, and we would trade at the end of each day. He asked me, let me ask you something, he says. Why you sit with those Nazi retards in the cafeteria? I said, I don't know, Pete. My first day here, they told me to sit with them. He goes, from today, you're with the Italians. And I said, awesome. And they became my closest friends. I mean, I got a book out of it. They were absolutely wonderful, honorable, honest, fun. The smallest so-called gang in the prison, but the one that commanded the most respect. And once word was out that I was with the Italians, it was hands off. And it was thanks to one guy. Shout out to Mark Lanzalotti. Mark was from Philly, and he saw in the New York Times I was going to be assigned to that prison on a Sunday. I was assigned on Thursday, and he took it upon himself to go to every one of the Italians to say, there's a CIA guy coming here. He's not an FBI agent. The FBI are cops and rats. The CIA protected us from the Muslims. And they're like, oh, okay. And so it was, welcome. No problems.
God, it has to be insanely stressful.
It was like living in the Twilight Zone. The stress will kill you. It's incredible. You see people break down all the time. They just lose it. And it's not like you're going to, be taken out to some medical unit someplace. You go to solitary and you can live or die down in there. Yeah. Oh, so I was telling you, so I waited about 6 weeks before I was comfortable enough to write a letter. So I very arrogantly called it Letter from Loretto because I had such respect for Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail. And so I said two things in this. I mean, I talked about the food and I talked about the Italians, but I said two things. I said there was this one guard who was really abusive. She was absolutely horrible. You know that phrase, rode hard and put away wet? That was this woman, all tatted out from the neck down, and just a nasty, mean, old, awful person. So I was walking through the hall one day, and she said, "Hey, are you that motherfucker whose name I can't pronounce at mail call?" And I go, "Kiriakou," just like it's spelled. She goes, "How about if I call you fuckface?" Like that. So I said, "Classy," and I walked away. Somebody later told me, they're not allowed to talk to us that way. That's a violation of, code 11.8 subsection, B, whatever. So I wrote it in the letter, and I was just like, life in prison. What am I going to do? This woman swears at me. There's nothing I can do. The other thing was more important. I had been there 3 days, and one of my cellmates was an Australian arsonist. And he said, "Let me walk you around and introduce you to the guys." I said, "Okay." We go to this other housing unit, and there's a little tiny guy there who didn't speak any English. And he said, "This is," I forget what his name is, Ahmed or something. He's from Iraq. And I said, "Ana sharaf bima'riftek. It's very nice to meet you." And he says, "تتكلم عربي وأنا عرب أنا من Iraq." I said, "Yeah, great. You're from Iraq. I was in Iraq. It's very nice to meet you." Turns out he was there on a terrorism charge. He was the imam of some mosque in New York, and somebody was trying to sell a Stinger missile to somebody, and he translated the document, the bill of sale, and he got wrapped up in this terrorism case. So I get called into the lieutenant's office the next day. And usually if you're being called into the lieutenant's office, you're going straight to solitary. So I hear my name, Kiriakou, lieutenant's office, immediately. Always with immediately. And they know you can't do it immediately because all the doors are locked. So I wait for a 10-minute move period. The bells ring, and I go to the lieutenant's office. I said, you wanted to see me? And they have this guy's picture on a computer screen. You know this guy? I said, I don't know him. I met him yesterday. What'd you say to him? I said, nice to meet you. What did he say to you? He said, nice to meet you too. Oh yeah? Well, after you walked out, he called a number in Pakistan and they told him to kill you. I said, get the fuck out of here. I could kill this guy with my thumb. Oh, no, don't do that. We've been looking for a reason to transfer him out. I'm like, okay. So every time I see this guy, I give him the stink eye, right? And then he gives me the stink eye back. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that doesn't make any sense. He's Kurdish. He only speaks Arabic and Kurdish. Why would he call a number in Pakistan when they don't speak Arabic in Pakistan? That just didn't make sense. So I saw him in the yard, and I went up to him, and he got kind of scared, like he was going to try to defend himself. And I had, 6 inches and 100 pounds on this guy. So I said, wait a minute. I just want to ask you a question. Did the cops say anything to you about me? And he said, yeah. I said, what did they say to you? And he said, they told me that after we met, you called a number in Washington and they told you to kill me. And I said, oh, they did they? So I went back to the law library and I looked this up, and this was a Class D felony. It was conspiring to commit violence in a federal facility. It's punishable by up to 5 years in prison. So I wrote it in my letter and I sent it to my attorney, and I didn't give it a second thought. I didn't know my attorney was friends with Ariana Huffington, who then put it on Huffington Post with this banner headline, millions of hits. The next thing I know, Jake Tapper drives to the prison to interview me, and it's everywhere from CNN to Playboy to The Economist and Time Magazine, when Time Magazine was a thing, and NPR's calling the prison to interview me, and the next thing I know, I'm called to the warden's office. Well, that's in an off-limits part of the facility. So the warden calls me in. He's like, I'm going to send you to solitary right now. And I thought, is now the time to be humble before the warden, or should I stake my claim? And I said, warden, with all due respect, I've gone nose to nose with Al-Qaeda, with Hezbollah, with the Iranians, and you want me to be afraid of you? Give me some credit. He said, yeah, we'll see what you say when you've spent some time in solitary. I said, I've lived in Yemen, in Pakistan. I'm not afraid of your Loretto, Pennsylvania solitary. Besides, I said, go ahead and send me to solitary. CNN's going to be waiting for you next to your car in the parking lot. And I just looked at him. I never went to solitary. Not for a minute.
Wow. Jeez. So they're just trying to set you guys up.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to get you guys at each other's throat, and hopefully one of you will do something.
They did it one other time. One of my attorneys...
Do you know who orchestrated that?
No.
Do you think it was the warden himself?
No, I don't think he was smart enough. I don't think he cared enough. It had to come from the agency.